This video is going to introduce you to the independent investigation, which is a key part of the Geography A level. It's also going to recap the 6 different stages that are involved in any fieldwork investigation. So fieldwork is essential, integral to the study of geography. Geographers have always been going out into the field, whether that's the natural environment or the built environment, and investigating to understand more about the topics they're interested in. And at GCSE, you will have carried out some geography fieldwork. You'll have gone in with a question, hypotheses. You'll have carried out some methods to collect data and then presented that, analysed it, and drawn some conclusions. That will have improved your understanding of a particular topic in geography. And at A level, you have the opportunity to do that again, but in much greater depth. Essentially, by the time you've completed your independent investigation, you will be an expert on the topic in the location that you've chosen. Perhaps no one will know more than you about your question. Well, the independent investigation itself, as we said, is based on a topic of your choosing. That means you can choose something that really interests you, that you're excited in, that you really enjoy, and you can really delve into that geographical topic in a lot more detail. You can choose any topic related to the A-level specification. So that gives you a really broad choice, although there are some topics that lend themselves better to carrying out fieldwork investigations than others. And we'll discuss what some of those might be and model some investigations for you to think about. Well, it's in the name, isn't it? It's independent. You will independently plan and collect data. You will design the strategies and the methodology that you're going to use for your data collection. All of that is based on your decisions about what the most appropriate way to carry out your investigation is. Again, we'll give you help with that, but ultimately the decision is up to you. And when you come to write up your 3,000 or 4,000 word report on your fieldwork, that's something you again will be doing on your own. We'll help you with the structure and give you guidance about each section. But ultimately, that's your work. I think that's really great because it means that you can be really proud of what you've achieved at the end of the day. You will have carried out a geographical investigation that will have improved your understanding of your particular topic. And lastly, the independent investigation is 20% of the Geography A level. It's a significant chunk of the course. And actually, that's a really good thing because it means you get that 1/5 of the course done before you even set foot in the exam hall. You might remember from GCSE that we can divide fieldwork up into 6 different stages. And each of these stages requires something for you to do. Let's have a look at those now. Firstly, you need to identify a question, then develop a strategy, collect data, present your data, analyze your data, and finally conclude and evaluate. Let's look at each of those in a bit more detail. So identifying your question is the first stage and arguably one of the most important stages because it frames the rest of your fieldwork investigation. Might sound like quite a simple thing to do, to come up with a question to investigate, but really this can be quite difficult. With so many different topics potentially to choose from, and then many different locations in which you could carry out your fieldwork, narrowing it down can take quite a long time. And you'll need to really read around the topic that you're interested in and explore the locations that you'd like to carry out your data collection in before you can settle on a question. Having done that, you'll also then develop some sub-questions that will help you to answer your main question and possibly some hypotheses to go with those as well. You can think of it as a little bit like an egg timer. Start off by picking a broad topic, and then you're going to narrow it down to a specific aspect of that topic and also a specific place. And at the end of your investigation, you'll then be able to broaden that out to place what you've learnt within the broader geographical context. The second stage of fieldwork is develop a strategy. You need to come up with a plan which is going to enable you to answer the question that you've set yourself. That means you're going to have to come up with a range of methods that will help you to collect primary data. You'll need to think what secondary data you're going to be including in your projects. You'll need to decide where and when you carry out your data collection. What sampling strategies will you use, for example? There's quite a lot to think about there. And again, you'll need to do some reading to inform your understanding and help you to settle on a plan. Stage 3 requires you to go out and actually collect your data in the field. Now that might be just with a pen and clipboard, or it might actually be collecting data digitally. And to do that, you might make use of an app such as Survey 123. That will be a really efficient way of collecting data and mean that that's stored and you can then easily present your data using the data you've collected in that app. So that brings us to the next stage, presenting your data. Data presentation is really important to subsequently be able to help you analyze your data. And if you have used an app like Survey 123, you can then use ArcGIS to quickly and effectively present your data. Of course, you can present your data by hand as well, or using Excel. Well, having presented your data, you're then going to analyze it. An analysis of your data is looking at it in detail to identify patterns and trends and try and give some explanation for those. Some projects, in fact, probably the majority of projects, will lend themselves to statistical analysis. There are a few projects which that won't be appropriate for, but where statistical analysis and statistical tests can be carried out, you should aim to plan those in from the beginning so that you know you're going to collect sufficient data and the right type of data to analyze in this way. Finally, having carried out all those 5 stages of your fieldwork investigation, you're going to conclude. You'll be able to answer your original question. You'll be able to assess whether your hypotheses were true or not. And then importantly, you'll be able to evaluate your investigation. You'll be able to look at each stage from choosing your question through to collecting your data to see whether or not it was effective. For example, you'll need to think about your methods and what the limitations of them were, because that will have an impact upon the accuracy of your data. And depending on how accurate your data is, that will have an impact upon your conclusions, how much you can trust them, how valid they are. So you need to think back over the whole project and evaluate. Well, talking about 6 stages of fieldwork makes it sound like quite a sort of straightforward, linear process. You go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 and so on. But the reality is often much more complex. Perhaps it looks a little bit more like this. In reality, you go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 and then back perhaps to stage 1 or 2 to refine your question or strategy, collect more data, discover that you didn't quite get what you needed and return again to your location. In reality, we call this an iterative approach. It's not simply moving from stage 1 to stage 2, it's much more complex. One example of how this might work out in practice is by carrying out a pilot study. You decide on some methods, you go and test those out on a small scale. Perhaps you've created a questionnaire and you try it out with 2 or 3 people to see how the data comes back. And that allows you to then make adjustments to that method, to the questionnaire, so that when you carry out a larger scale data collection, your time isn't wasted and you get the type and quality of data that you wanted. Well, all that I've just talked about, introducing the independent investigation and the 6 stages of fieldwork, can be found in the Independent Investigation Student Workbook. Another excellent resource to have to hand as you're working on your investigation is a student guide to the A-level independent investigation. You'll see in brackets there, non-examined assessment, or NEA. That's another term for the investigation that you may see in some of the resources. And this booklet is freely and easily available for download online. So do have a look at that. It covers all of the different stages of the investigation right from preparing your question through to writing up your final project.